Hi, everyone. So as Anna said, my name's Caroline Coady. I'm Assistant Director for Social Care at the National Children's Bureau, and I've actually worked for the National Children's Bureau for the last 9 years and as Assistant Director for the last 6. My background, I've got, as well as a degree in health and social care, I've also got an NVQ5 in leadership and management and children and young people's services. And for a number of years, I was a CQC registered manager of a support service for young people with autism, social, emotional, mental health needs and behaviour that challenges, as well as a service for young people with complex health needs. And then personally, I am the step-parent of 3 teenagers, which is a journey in and of itself. And they have had a range of challenges from bereavement to mental health needs. And I think one of the things that really sticks with me in my experiences with them, but also that resonates with me from the performance that we've seen from Chicken Shed this morning, is one of the things my eldest stepdaughter said to me is that the thing that she's appreciated most over the years is the fact that I've been able to believe in her at a time when she hasn't been able to believe in herself. And I think that that's a critically important thing when we're thinking about how we support this group of young people to build resilience and to thrive into adulthood. And for me, that's one of the critical things that this reform is an opportunity to think about and embed in practice across all of the services and settings that you're providing. So Anna talked a little bit about NCB and how we work as an organisation earlier. And I guess one of the things to reflect on is that breadth of the different kind of networks and activity and things that we offer as an organisation. We know that this group of young people are more likely to have experienced bullying. They're more likely to have experienced bereavement. They might have undiagnosed special educational needs. And actually, it's really critical that we bring that breadth of learning across our organisation and the expertise from those different teams and networks to ensure that all of the providers that are supporting young people have the skills, the knowledge and the understanding that we can share around that in order to provide the highest quality and consistency of support for young people. So as we've said, I'm going to talk a bit about the actual Sexual Awareness Provider Preparedness programme that we're leading on behalf of DfE. So this is really about kind of 3 kind of clear aims of the programme. So one of them is about that kind of sector intelligence, so bringing all of you together and thinking about how the implementation of the new regime is impacting on the sector. So understanding some of those unintended consequences, understanding some of the challenges, working with all of you to resolve some of them where we can and bringing you together to kind of work through some of those trickier issues, but also where there are challenges that we don't feel we can resolve together, bringing those back to DfE and to Ofsted to unpick those and to come back to you with advice and guidance and information on what to do. In terms of raising awareness, this is about how we are developing more accessible information. I'm sure that all of you will have had your best attempt at reading all of the DfE and Ofsted guidance, but we're really keen to make sure that we can break that down, bring it out to you in kind of bite-sized ways that are accessible through tools, resources and information, and we'll talk a bit more about the detail of that as I go through this session. And then really critically for us is around improving outcomes for young people. So we are committed, as Anna said, in terms of NCB's vision and through this programme to ensure that young people living in supported accommodation have the opportunity to develop those trusted relationships with adults that we know are critical to being able to feel safe, supported and secure in your home. And to having that high quality support in nurturing environments that will prepare young people well for adult life. Now, picking up on Matthew's point just then around that kind of continuum between support and care, we know that over the last year there's been some kind of some distinctions made between support and care across the sector, and actually for us it's critically important that we're clear that actually this is about high quality support being provided by people who care about the young people that they're supporting, who care about their outcomes and their futures, and who provide that support in kind, compassionate and understanding ways with an acknowledgement of the experiences that some of these young people may have had, as we've seen shared through Chicken Shed, and as I'm sure we'll see from some of the young people that we've got coming for a workshop this afternoon. So I was just going to talk through a very brief kind of timeline of the process that's happened and pick up on some of the points in Callum's presentation as well. So obviously we had the legal change around young people under 16 not being able to be placed in unregulated settings, a really crucial step forward. We've got guidance now around what this system looks like and the regulations which set out the detail of the 4 quality standards. And then moving forward, once we get past the registration window, so past the 28th of October, we're going to have that inspection regime beginning. And I think for us at NCB, critical to this is that we know there's media attention around some of the negative outcomes for young people. And we know that there have been, for a smaller group of young people, some really tragic outcomes and their experiences in supported accommodation. But actually, those outcomes are not isolated to what happens in supported accommodation. There are systemic challenges across this part of the sector that need to be addressed in order for us to really keep young people safe and protected throughout their childhoods and into adulthood. So what that means is thinking about actually what are our decision-making pathways? What is the way that we assess and understand and identify need? How do we communicate that well to providers, even in an emergency? We know that sometimes we're in a situation where for these young people, this is talked about as kind of a last resort option. How do we change that narrative? How do we can think about the steps that we can take earlier in young people's pathways in some of the ways that were indicated in that performance that could make a difference, that could mean young people are better prepared and better able to thrive in settings that are focused on support and developing independence. So all of this sits alongside those commitments in stable homes built on love. So talking about that investment in foster care, that investment in kinship care for young people where that is the right choice for them. But it also means reflecting on some of the findings from the Competitions and Markets Authority report and thinking about actually how do we improve the sufficiency of the wider provision that is needed in order to support young people to be well cared for and protected. So I wanted to move in and focus a bit more detail on the key principles of the reform and thinking very much about young people's voice and how we embed this both within this national programme but also for you at a local level. So I'm not going to read through all the principles in detail, but you can see them up on the screen there. These need to underpin everything we're thinking about. There will be paperwork, there will be forms to fill in, there will be a process to go through, but ultimately the purpose of all of that is to achieve these principles for young people and to make sure that they have a better experience as they move into adulthood. The 4 quality standards, therefore, have an implication for the impact they're intended to have on young people in these settings. So the leadership and management standard, for example, this should enable a young person to have confidence in the organisation providing their accommodation and their support that they're receiving and the people who are responsible for running it. The protection standard should mean that children are enabled to feel safe and that their needs are met in their homes. The accommodation standard is that young people experience a comfortable and secure living environment. And the support standard, that the support they receive is individual, tailored support that meets their needs. So I wanted to share a little bit about how we're embedding young people's voice in the national programme. You've seen already the work that we've been doing at the conferences with Chicken Shed, and we've got some young people from some providers coming this afternoon to do a workshop with Chicken Shed to share their views and experiences about what living in supported accommodation has been like for them, but also about their views on the standards and on the principles and how they see that becoming a reality. And at the end of this afternoon's session, you'll hear back from those young people as part of another performance, sharing what they've discussed in the afternoon's workshop. We're also working with care experienced young people, but specifically young people with experience of supported accommodation. We know in a lot of the consultation there's been lots of feedback from care experienced young people, but not always young people with experience of this specific type of setting, and we're really keen that that view and that experience is brought into this programme. And actually, one of the ways that we want to do that, therefore, is by working with all of you and thinking about how all of you as providers are embedding that voice of young people in the developments that you're going to make over the coming weeks and months. And similarly, for local authorities, how are you engaging with your children in care councils if you have them? And are there young people who are representative of this group of young people within those mechanisms? So how do we build on that, and how do we make sure that's embedded moving forwards? Okay, so I'm moving on now to talk a bit more about the support and resource from the programme. So you'll see here in the wheel in the middle, we've got kind of 4 quadrants in the way that we're kind of dividing up the support. So we've got support for providers, support for local authorities, a whole range of kind of training and learning tools that we're going to be developing with you, with feedback from everyone who's coming to these sessions. And then we've got our communities of practice and co-production. And so this is very much about bringing the voice of young people, again, into the tools and resources, into the training, into the workshops and the things that we're developing. So there'll be a programme of support which will be delivered regionally initially, as well as having some national events as well. Some of them will be focused on support for local authorities, and when we're talking about local authorities in the context of this regional support, it will be wider local authority colleagues. So not just commissioners, but placement teams, social workers, other key partners, so quality assurance officers, all of those partners who make up this system. We'll be working to develop kind of regional action plans very quickly so that there's a clear plan of the different kind of map of activity that we'll be delivering. And actually, we'll be also working with you to understand the kind of different nuances around the groups of young people that you're supporting. So we know that in some areas of the country, for example, unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people might be a particular area of need. And so we're going to tailor support with feedback from you in the way that you really need it to address the key issues. And similarly for providers, we're going to be running further conferences, seminars, and we're also developing a provider readiness tool. So we're working with Ofsted and DfE to build this, and it will be a way of you kind of sense checking against the guidance, auditing the work that you're doing to prepare for registration and for delivering and implementing the standards, and also feeding that into then the work that we're doing with quality assurance officers and commissioners in local authorities, so that you have a way of communicating and evidencing the work that you're doing. So a bit of a timeline for this support, because I'm sure you're all thinking, wow, that sounds brilliant and that's lots, but we've only got until October, and how are we going to fit all of this in? So obviously we've got April up there, so we know we've had the guidance published now, we're running these conferences, and we've got, as Matthew pointed out, our registration window opening on the 28th of April. In May, we're going to quite quickly start to work with you to plan in initial communities of practice face-to-face in regions. So the idea of these are that we're going to bring together local authority commissioners, quality assurance teams, as well as bringing together providers, starting to think about what some of the trickier challenges are and what are the things that we can do to support and to work through some of those together. We're going to be launching e-learning. So we know that there are a large number of providers who are going to be registering, but there are an even larger number of settings who are going to be delivering this support. So what we want to do is look at all of the different ways that we can make sure these messages reach out, that you've got tools and resources that you can disseminate out into your settings to support other colleagues to understand what they need to know about these changes. So we'll have e-learning launching in May as well, alongside that provider readiness tool I mentioned. And then as we move into June and July, we're going to start to have thematic roundtables. By that point, we should start to see where some of the trickier challenges and the trickier questions are emerging. And we're going to bring key partners together to unpick some of those and then share the solutions and the ideas as widely as possible across the country. We're also going to be launching then a kind of a national training programme. So that will be where we'll pick up some of those issues around kind of specific groups of young people, around particular kind of training models. So for example, that could include trauma-informed practice training for providers. It could include quality assurance and monitoring support for quality assurance officers in local authorities, but making sure that everyone is being shared the same messages, the same information in the same way, so that we start to build that consistency and that approach, and also those supportive and collaborative communities of practice for all of you in the regions in which you're working. And then finally, as we know, we've got that kind of deadline around having your completed application submitted and acknowledged by Ofsted. So through that stage 1 application phase before the 27th of October, so that you can continue to provide and local authority commissioners can continue to place young people. So just to give you a little bit more information about staying up to date with the programme, we have a microsite in our website, the National Children's Bureau. You should be able to find it easily. We'll be sharing the links to it, but you can also just Google supported accommodation NCB and it will come straight up for you. But it's got information and it's broken down into different sections, and that's where we'll be adding all of the links to the training and the resources and the information about events as we move forward. And then just in conclusion, we've also, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going through the guidance on a regular basis, but still always struggling to find it the first time I look. So on our regulation page on the website, we're going to have the links to all of the key bits of guidance, regulations, where you can find the secondary legislation, and that'll all be linked for you in the slides that come out after the session.